Okay, thank you. So welcome back after lunch, everybody, which brings us to the Featherston Master Plan Principles and Main Street Link. So we're looking at page 59. There are three recommendations. Firstly, that we agree to the Featherston Master Plan Draft Principles with some additions. We agree to the proposed concept plans for the street, and we note that there will be formal public consultation.
You're going to move to receive the papers?
No, we're going to move straight to the recommendations. So, Mr. Wilson, I think you were going to say something
Just
to
to introduce, because we have a number of points on the agenda, so I want to just try to give you a sense of which ones are more important to debate other. So, notwithstanding, we have Richard Knott and Russell available to ask any questions you have. But you've had workshops, you've had the opportunity to chew over the master plan. This is a continuing journey, but the most important thing here is we just want to get confirmation so we can go out for consultation. So, following feedback from the community, there was a question to change a couple of the principles, which we incorporated here. So, and essentially the second recommendation, the proposed concept plan, approved the link to the station, which is quite a critical thing that came up. We have a paper later that we'll talk to that a bit further. But the main thing is you should be well and truly aware of this. If you've got any questions of the staff, please ask, and or any thoughts?
Right. So if we just come to the recommendations, which I suspect there's no great problem if we ask for a mover to all three. We have the Deputy Mayor. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gray, thank you. You have 10 minutes.
I have, following the workshop that was held last week, I thought that Russell and the representative from the consultation gave a very thorough and in-depth overview of the consultation process that had taken place, the feedback that had been received from our community, and how that had fed into this revised plan, which I felt very comfortable was in line with what I had heard from our community of Featherston, and I feel that the revised plan now gives a much better representation of that and a good document for the next phase of consultation. So yeah, thank you to Russell for the work that's been done, and to the consultation team. So thank you.
Oh, that was well under.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. We'll go to the seconder next, who was Councillor Gray.
Anything to add?
You may come back later if you suddenly decide you have. And the third.
Great councillor.
Featherston.
Featherston, sorry, yeah. I'd just like to endorse the work that's been done that Melissa stated to Russell and the team. I think I've followed this process now since it initiated back in 2019, all the way through. I've been very keen. Took the liberty to send me the workshop details from last week's meeting, which I was unable to attend, but I'm completely satisfied given the depth that we've gone to the application, and I'd endorse the sentiments. Thank you. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, councillor. So any other councillors with a question? Thank you, councillor Woodcock.
Starting note, it's a great vision and idea for Featherston. I just have a little bit of a personal concern with the ratepayer about how much all this has actually cost so far, how much it's going to cost the ratepayer at the end of the day, and where the funding and everything is coming from.
I might refer that back to the Chief Executive and ask, when we consult people, will they have any idea about the financing and the impact on their rates?
Russell, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, the response to councillor's question, we have set aside a budget for this project, and we also have a wider budget for spatial planning, which is the activation of the last year in December, the South Warrior spatial plan, 30-year framework with its strategic elements. So did you want detail as to further information to your loss?
Yeah, just give an idea of overall costs at the end of the day and how much is allowed to know what's been spent to date and all the rest of it.
The budget figure for this exercise is 100,000, and so that amount is on track. So we keep a watch on that. However, if councillors want more feedback on that, we can provide that to you.
Do we get outside funding from other government agencies to help with this, or is it all in-house?
Yeah, good question. Because Featherston is one of the 7 CDOs, the complex development opportunities, we have opportunity to work with government agencies to look at support funding to activate the master plan and final results for the master plan, and factoring in that into our thinking and looking at our implementation plan. So we have to have an implementation plan to bring this alive. So there's prospect of the implementation plan costing us to the development, but the opportunity of sourcing funding, having discussions and sourcing funding from government agencies, because in terms of Wellington Regional Council, Wellington Regional Leadership Committee, they are wanting good results across the 7 CDOs. So the right results for the different 7 CDOs, and within that there will be decisions about the extent of funding or not within each of those CDOs. So I hope that sort of gives an idea or a possibility of working together and sourcing funding for it when necessary.
So Russell, thank you. So essentially by council spending 100,000 doing this planning, it's going to possibly open up the opportunity to utilise other funding out of central government to develop further.
To an applicable and appropriate master plan, final master plan with an implementation plan, but as we're working towards the final, we should be having those combined discussions with government agencies and regional agencies to activate points of where there's supported points within bringing this live. So there is that opportunity.
Is that okay? Yes, I have one question of the mover. In terms of approving the public consultation, is there anything in here that even if everybody says, yes, we love it, go and do it, we will still think is so undoable that we will wonder afterwards, why did we ever ask people if they wanted, dare I say it, to move the railway station or something of that? In other words, is this going to be something that gets a reaction from the public along the lines of us, you know, you're asking us the silly things again, or
obviously I don't know the master plan intimately, but from what I saw of the presentation from Russell and the team last week, I feel like the real pain points that were in the original draft have been removed, and that we're now left with things that make the main street far more workable, usable and livable, and certainly including that link to the train station again improves that livability and workability of the area. And certainly being a resident and councillor in Featherston, some of the greatest feedback that I hear from Featherston residents is related directly to the main street, how we're able to use it, how it functions, and its current limitations. So I think the master plan in its current form starts to address those things. It starts to and certainly improve them and make the whole area better. And I think it's still broad enough and open enough that it allows for that level of community engagement and feedback to continue to improve and mould it into something that is exactly what our community would want and does want. Like Woody, I have asked questions of Russell and the team around cost and implementation, because I personally think that the biggest tragedy that would come from this is if we go through this entire process, get this incredible looking plan, and then at the end of it aren't able to implement any of it due to its cost being so far outside of what our community can afford. So I will watch with great interest the process of looking for that outside funding that offsets the cost, so that we do go through this process and end up with a Featherston that looks like this, and not one that says, oh, I wish we looked like this.
Thank you very much. Yes, Russell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for context around that. Just responding to your question, Mr. Mayor, the surety that I could perhaps add is that we've done this exercise. Your question is around the community being satisfied or landing in a space that works with the community. So we've got within our work a vision which we've used and have been prepared to refine it. We've got guiding principles supporting the vision. So that helps gives the context and back to the community in terms of how we go forward. And then we'll have to look at when we put out the draft for formal consultation, that's when we'll get the feedback of any comment or debate about elements that aren't right.
Right. Is there anybody who has not spoken so far who wishes to do so? Okay, Leslie, you get a right of reply. Okay.
Honestly, pardon?
Yes, Russell.
Did you wish to hear some comment from Richard Knott, who's done elements of design work?
Well, if I don't wish to in any way say that I do not wish to hear them, but since all the councillors have had an opportunity to speak on the recommendation, and as I have a sixth sense that they're about to be agreed to, I'm not sure that it adds anything to our decision making. So in that case, I will put recommendations 1, 2, and 3 as a job lot. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Agreed. Now, we're about to alter the agenda. Amy, is that correct?
Yeah, just before moving on, we had an action to refer this report to further in the past. Do you want me to just note that as an action, or do you want to make that as a decision?
Well, no, I'm happy just noted as an action.
Okay.
It goes without saying. And
Item C6.
item C6, please, which is page 165. And this is to do with the district licensing committee, which we skipped over just a minute ago, I think.
We're going out of order.
Yes, we are a little out of order. I think we're doing it to make life easier for you, Rick, I believe.
Oh, thank you for that.
We're not, are we?
We'll have that noted down. But yes, look,
Well, just before we come to it. So once again, we've got 3 recommendations. Advise the appointment of a councillor to the district licensing committee list, then appoint a chairperson in accordance with section 189 of the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act. Instruct the chief executive to pursue an expression of interest process to appoint a commissioner. And then recommendation 2, advise the appointment of a councillor to the district licensing committee list and then appoint a deputy chairperson. So do I have a mover for that?
For the recommendations.
A or B?
A or B?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
gosh,
yeah, so- Just to be clear,
Okay, yes, right.
recommendation one are in the alternative.
Yes, go.
So
for
the
it.
council has a choice to either appoint an independent commissioner. And so option B is that I am then delegated to go through expressions of interest process to appoint an independent commissioner. First one is a council A option is a council wishes to appoint a councillor to the district licensing committee and you have to appoint them to the list so that they can then be appointed as the chairperson. I know it's a bit of bureaucracy, but that's why. So there's two steps. You have to appoint them to the list, then they have to be appointed. So the same thing follows for the deputy chairperson.
Okay, so in that case, we'll go back to 1A or 1B and we'll have a recommendation which I will move that we adopt 1A. If you don't like that, of course, all you have to do is vote against it and then we've automatically agreed 1B. So I'm moving that we adopt 1A. Do I have a seconder, please? I do, councillor Olds. So in this, under this, we would advise the appointment of a councillor. Then, due to bureaucracy, we would
appoint them.
we'd appoint the chairperson.
Point them to the list of the district license committee.
Yeah.
So a member of that.
Yeah.
Membership from that, you can appoint as the chair.
Okay. Now, did I pick the right one to go with, Rick?
Councillor,
That's not for me to debate. So
so which councillor?
I think Harry summed it up, and I've probably made this more confusing than it needs to be. So you've got two avenues of choice to begin with. There's one a chair, which is an elected member, and one is a commissioner, which is an independent person outside of that. Now, with the district licensing committee, I'm not sure councillors know, while it's part of council, but it's a statutory function that council does. It does have the independence of its own realm. So it's a commission of inquiry under the 1908 Act. And it hears all the applications to do with the alcohol licensing. So the big thing is whether you want a chair, it's an elected member, or whether you want a commissioner. Now, the big thing with elected members is to ensure that the conflicts of interest, perceived or actual, are actually debated and discussed to make sure we don't find ourselves in a position that down the track we're finding out that there is conflicts of interest. So if going down that, you just want to make sure the memberships are very clear as to if they put their name forward, that they've thought about that and that they are clear on that point. The first point is that because we don't have any of the elected members currently on the list, we need to appoint them onto the list, and then from there you can elect your chair.
So if we're talking about recommendation 1A, are we about to go through a two-step process? So firstly, we decide that
Which who?
we want to appoint a councillor rather than the commissioner. And then after that, we make a decision on who that councillor is.
Correct.
Right, okay. And then we would go through the same process for recommendation 2.
Correct.
Right, okay. So we have a mover and seconder that we go along with 1A. Do I have any discussion from anybody? I do not. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, councillor Olds, seconded. Now, should we?
Yeah, I think I might just be noted as abstaining from that because.
Okay, councillor Plummer abstain. Because I've indicated to councillor Plummer that I would nominate him as the chairperson. So do we proceed with that now, officer?
So what I suggest is, whomever's been put forward,
Yes.
you then nominate them or propose them to go onto the list, so
Yes.
they get appointed onto the list.
Right.
And then from there you can dictate as to.
So in that case, I nominate councillor Plummer on the list. I see the deputy mayor seconding that.
Yes, and asking a question,
Oh.
just to clarify, we are only looking for one representative to add to the list.
Well,
There will be two.
Yeah, I thought there was two.
When we come to,
Yeah.
Okay, so now you happy? Okay, so I gather that the deputy mayor found herself, as we sometimes do, at an option where she waved at the wrong time. Do you wish to withdraw your? No, you're happy. Excellent. So it's been moved and seconded that we put councillor Plymmer on the list. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any against? That's carried with one abstention. And now we come to advise the appointment of a councillor and then appoint as a deputy chairperson in accordance with section 189 of the Sale and Supply. Now, yes, please.
So, are you making an appointment to the chair at this point, or you're not?
Well, let's do that while we're at it.
yeah, under.
So we've got to go through three processes.
No, just that you advise, that Alistair Plymmer.
Yeah.
Appointed to the list of the,
On the assumption there's no other nominations that you're putting to the list.
his name, Alistair.
Yeah. Yes, that's what we want to do. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just double check the way, because I know in this, so appoint councillor Plymmer to the district licensing committee list, then appoint as a chairperson. So
Yep.
I'm a bit confused because I've got almost two separate things being moved, but I think they're the same thing.
Well, in fact, we've had three things. Firstly, we decided on 1A
Right?
rather than 1B.
Yeah, which is the,
Yeah, then we voted to put councillor Plymmer onto the list.
but that's one resolution. I'm sorry, that's why I'm
Yeah.
confused.
All right.
If we do this one here, that.
Yeah. Okay.
So are we going here?
Okay.
Doing that over, or are you happy for me to say you moved it and it was seconded by Colin, because that's the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
one for 1A then?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
you happy with
Okay.
that?
I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Yes, so you can incorporate it in the same wording. If you change it to say, the recommendation is to advise the appointment of Alistair Plymmer to the district licensing committee list, and then appoint Alistair Plymmer in accordance with section 189 of the Sale and Supply. And you've actually done that. That's the resolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Next one is to appoint a councillor.
now we want to appoint another councillor. And then we want to appoint that councillor as the deputy chairperson.
Yeah.
And as councillor Macaulay has expressed an interest.
Absolutely.
And assures me it was a very long time she actually held liquor licenses herself, and therefore there is no conflict of interest. I move that we appoint councillor Macaulay to the district licensing committee list and then appoint her as deputy chairperson in accordance with section 189. Any seconders? Councillor Plymmer, second.
Everyone.
All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Does that mean you're free to go, Rick? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.
I seconded councillor Elam's. Sorry, I moved it. Councillor Elam seconded. Okay, so if we now return to the sort of the agenda.
Oh, hell, I thought we'd done all those.
No, we haven't gone through that.
So we've done the master plan.
Yeah.
And now we're going to come to Reading Street and Church Street upgrades, which, as I indicated, I had a conflict of interest. I will be withdrawing from the meeting.
You can still be in the meeting.
Sorry?
You can still be in the meeting.
You can still be in the meeting, you can still speak, you just can't.
I think you find if you look at the rules, that's not altogether true.
Planning is that you step away from the
Yes, step away.
table.
Yeah.
Melissa will come
I
to
am
a
going to step away. Okay, sorry for leaving a mess. Melissa.
So this.
All under control.
Yep.
So as the mayor has indicated, we are now considering item C3, the contract C253 Reading Street and Church Street upgrades report. Mr. Corbett, would you like to add anything to the report?
So could I just to give some context on this. So one of the things that a number of people have asked me and says, why didn't the developer pay for it all?
Yeah.
It seems like an immediately odd question.
Sorry, what was it?
Why didn't the developer pay for it all? Okay. So the RMA is very specific in terms of making sure the developer only pays for the immediate effect of their activity. So another example is the Five Streets Medical Centre. They
did not pay for all the connectivity of footpaths, schools and things like that. So that's part of, so that this is part of the decision making the commissioner has to make, is what is the apportionment that sits between the effect of the development and the effect of the ordinary works a council would be expected to do as an infrastructure provider over time. Okay, so you'll see in the report, it says that that this is how it would be apportioned. So in this context, Reading Street was on the list to upgrade around the schools, do the work to widen the carriageway, all those types of things that a council would normally do. So the commissioner, part of the argument was what is the balance between what the developer under the law should be. It's not a negotiation, it's what the RMA would say is a direct effect from that activity versus the usual business of council. So that's why we've ended up in that apportionment between and that was set by the commissioner. So that's not a matter that the council can change. So in essence, this paper is actually quite simple. Sorry, and because it has been decided, the apportion has been decided. So we're in the main point of this paper is that our delegation or my delegation stops at 500K. Anything above that is a council decision to agree. And so this exceeds my delegation. We've gone, we went through the tender process, and as you can see, we went out to 10 parties. Only one party was prepared to put in a price, tested that true value of that price, as much as you are able to do. And so we think this is a reasonable cost for the scope of works it's doing there. So the real decision is not to relitigate the decisions about the engineering design and all those types of things. That's a conversation with another place. It's not the purpose of this paper. So sorry to, pour cold water on this, but that's really is the point. It's about the exercise of the delegation to approve the tender, and we've followed the proper procurement processes we're required to do for doing that. So happy to take any questions, or Stefan to answer any questions.
Just to clarify, we've got this tender basically as council, it must be paid because that was the agreement. Is that what you're saying?
The cost will be apportioned, paid, but the process of negotiating the total cost, as you go out to tender and procure for the services. So you take the design, and this is what this is. So you've got, having gone to tender, this is the price that has come back.
So it's a nice round price. But the other thing that I was just curious about is how much is in that fund, in the infrastructure reserve fund.
So that's in a table on the report. So on my list, it's 73.
The closing balance.
Yep. So the opening balance.
Oh, right. Got you. Yeah.
And that table not only includes this, but also some of the things that we think might be coming as a claim against you, to give you a proper sense of what the residual amount in the close. So the closing forecasters balance is 2,316,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Elam, so you had a question?
Yes. Certainly understand the process in the rulings from the commissioner. However, just looking through the paper, Calibre Engineers have estimated the costs were going to be under $1 million, excluding just. Yet the only contractor who has tendered has come up and provided a price of $1.5 million, excluding just, which, because there's only one tenderer, therefore that isn't a competitive process. Going forward, if there's any other similar circumstances in the future where only one tender is received by council, is it possible that the tender period is extended and council invites other local contractors, so that it therefore becomes a more competitive tender process, and the ratepayers perhaps get greater value for money?
I mean, in the future, yes, but this is too late for that.
Oh, I accept that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. That's right.
Yeah.
And we have done that before.
But this is only.
Extended the tender.
Yeah. No, but the question was, going out to further tender than the three that were requested to do this work.
Councillor Woodcock.
Thanks for the report, guys. It's pretty thorough. Just said there, Harry, about the orchards, why the orchards don't have to pay the whole lot, and I accept that, but I've been asked by local contractors why the same thing hasn't applied to certain other developments in town, where the developer has had to pay for quite a bit of stuff outside the realm of their actual development. So it would be interesting to see how in the future how this works through a commissioner. I've got a fair bit here actually, so I'd also like to know why there was no requirement for footpaths and curbs by the developer in Market Road, especially since they've now changed their plans and put the hospital off the edge of Market Road, not the other side of the development as was proposed at the start. And as Aidan said, the tender is 500,000 above what was originally expected, and that doesn't include the 100,000 of contingency. So it could end up being 600,000 over. Why in the design the crossing is right at the intersection, especially with a lot of school kids using it, it's going to be extremely dangerous. Why are there no sumps on Church Street corner and that in the design on the plan? I can't believe it.
Yes.
I can't.
Hopefully there's a test of the
I can't see the sumps on the plan there. So it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen with water. Now, if the orchards and their requirements to pay for half the road, plus a small section of the footpath at the end, and their proportion of the roading is, now correct me if I'm wrong with any of these figures, 343,752. So that means the whole road, the roading aspect is $687,500. Just for the roading part. So that leaves approximately $850,000 for footpaths, berms and topsoiling, etc. So I'm not sure what other costs are actually included because we haven't got a real detailed plan of the costs. But I've done some costing up for the footpaths alone. So the footpath alone with the quotes I've had a price section, and this was adding a little bit to be reasonable to the contractor, is about $40,000. Okay, then my estimate somewhere the topsoiling and the berms and the swales is, I'll put 50k down, which is quite generous again. Traffic management, about 50,000 for 50 days of traffic management. And that's remembering that these companies have their own traffic management. So
Sorry to interrupt you, Woody. I just want to direct a quick question that I hope will sort of in line with what. Are we in any position at this point to renegotiate this report? We're not.
No.
So
I'd just like to put this on the record. That's
yeah,
what,
sure.
things. So that adds up to about 140,000. So you've left about 710,000 plus 100,000 contingency. I find it hard to fathom where, although I haven't got all every aspect of everything in front of me, another $700,000 or $800,000 is a hell of a profit margin for this company. When, like Aidan said, this should have gone out, and I believe all tenders from now on should go to be actually approach the local companies, not just hope they see it on Tenderlink or something else. And that say 710,000, that's like a 3.35% rate rise for the rate class over the district. Also in the plans, it has a drop-off zone for the kids. Well, myself and the mayor went for a meeting with the school board and the principal last week, and they actually told us that they had asked to not have a drop-off zone put in place. Although I have seen this drop-off zone looks like it's designed slightly different than what they were probably perceiving it to be.
Says in the plans to be confirmed.
Yeah. And so that's all I have to say on that. Thank you very much.
I think, Woody, let's just sit down with Tim and have a good discussion around those types of things. But in terms of this paper, we've followed the process. This is literally a decision around the exercise of the delegation. and where the funding comes from, which is from the infrastructure reserve. So, and that's the purpose of the recommendation. So we can sit down with Tim and he can discuss the design aspects and all those types of things when he's back.
Sorry, Harry, can I ask what the process is going forward for council to have an assurance that we won't find ourselves in this position again where we have concerns such as Woody's and Councillor Elam's on the table, where we've got figures that seem large or developer contributions that seem small. Even in my own mind, I'm wondering why we're spending over $1 million upgrading footpaths when I know in other towns there's areas that don't even have footpaths. So is there a process as council that we can follow to find a way not to be in a situation such as this?
So if you, I know there's comments about the medical centre things. We literally put design plans. People saw the whole iteration of the design goes through the Assets and Services Committee. So that would be the process that we would follow. So, you know, it's not like you'll be suddenly presented with this.
No.
You know, so you do see the designs, you do see those things. So you have some comfort around that.
Did you, I was wondering if there's some way that we could move that we don't ever accept a non-competitive bid unless it's an emergency situation in the future. Just to have a, just seems very dangerous.
Would that be fall under our procurement policy outside of council remit? Can I have some advice on?
Well, we follow a procurement policy that's best practice. And occasionally things you accept a tender and from a co-op, and that happens in a small region like ours occasionally. But you know, there's rigor around the process. Even where you find yourself, I live in one people tender. So I think. You know, I understand the what's motivating the idea, but that would be quite constraining.
But if it were covered by like an emergency situation, then it's really important that you didn't extend the tender or broaden the range of people bidding.
That's a sort of conversation for another day in terms of making a change for a policy.
I mean, the key point Council's making is, are we going wide enough to get a good
Exactly what my question is.
ballot box? You know, and that's the question. And so so that's what we're taking on board.
So yeah,
I'm sure Tim will explain.
I guess it's because here it's showing that they were invited from 3 companies. That's literally, that's what this says. And to me, you know, if it had gone out to more, then I don't even think that the closing date, you know, that with that extension, I think that would probably have been enough to have more than one, if there were more people that were invited to apply. But are we constrained at that? No, so we can actually put it out to more people? Okay, cool.
Councillor.
I made some comments to Aidan and to the Mayor, and I think I made them in our workshop as well, about the possibility to answer Woody's concerns, and a lot of his concerns is actually re-establishing a tenders board as part of the Assets Committee. Now, I don't know what that process is, and Harry, you might be able to give us some information about that. There used to be a tenders board, and it may well actually answer a lot of the questions that come in, because you know, we all know people who have got businesses and they'll go, oh, I can do it for this and I can do it for that. But actually tendering it as a local government is a pretty, it's an interesting beast. And unless you've been on the side of the businesses tendering, which I've had a little bit of experience with Oldfields course, it is a very interesting process. But to answer some of those concerns that you've got, a tenders board may not give you the answers you want, but it will potentially give you some peace of mind that the process has been rigorous and followed. So maybe some advice on that would be good.
Do I just have any further comment on that? Do I have Thank you for your comments. We'll move on to the recommendations. Do I have a mover to accept the Higgins Contracting Limited tender to the value of $1,539,000?
Because I don't see an end to this for so many years.
Note that council officers will confirm Orchards Retirement Village will pay their allotted amount, excluding GST, which is 50% of the various works due upon works completed, and approve the expenditure of 1.2 million to be funded from the Infrastructure Reserve Fund to cover the remaining costs identified above. Thank you, Councillor Plimmer. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Olds. And I will now vacate the chair and the mayor. Sorry, all those in favour? Oh,
It's the critical part.
no. You're against, thank you. And we will note that, thank you. And now I will vacate the chair and the mayor will resume.
Thank you very much.
Cool. We want to see. Then we'll get it back.
Yeah, there was emergency.
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, that's your one. Yeah, because the mayor's one. It's all over. Great work.
Right. So we move now to item C4, the emergency roadworks funding report. And what page is that, please? 76.
Bloody hell, bigger.
So if we could look at
Emergency
page 76. And what we're talking about here is additional funding required to reinstate the roading network following the extreme weather events we've had in 2022. And so the recommendation is that we approve funding for the sum of $583,332 from the Rural Roading Reserve Fund to enable network reinstatement. And this is not budgeted in the current annual plan. Do I have a mover, please? I do. The Deputy Mayor, do I have a seconder? I do. Thank you, Councillor Woodcock. Deputy Mayor, what would you like to say?
I'd just like to acknowledge, obviously, the amount of extreme weather events that we've had that have led to some of these excessive costs.
Thank you. Councillor Woodcock.
No, I just like to appreciate, acknowledge all the hard work the roading crew have been doing with the extreme events and everything we've had in the last 12 months or so. Understanding that there's a lot of work and a lot of costs involved.
Councillor Plimmer.
Yeah, I'd like to, Harry, just to talk about the closing forecast balance. That really worries me that we're down to 300,000 and
Yeah.
so we are literally one flood away from no money.
Yeah.
That does concern me, and I think from a council, we're going to have to take this into account in the annual plan. And when we look at re-establishing this fund, we talked about it in a long way at the last annual plan, and it was probably a missed opportunity. Actually, we probably should have actually looked at an increase in the rural contributions at that stage, but with everything else going on with rates, we decided against it. So I think perhaps when rural rates went up quite low, we probably missed the opportunity to. And this has always been a very popular thing that was set up by Jeppe a couple of years ago.
Many.
You know, there hasn't been a lot of negative impact from rural ratepayers about this because they see the value of it. But Harry, you know, 1,000 doesn't give us much bad at all.
No, I mean,
I'll just go to Councillor Ealams first.
Thank you. So our fund, the Rural Roading Fund receives 300K every year. So the next lot of 300,000 will not come into the fund until the 1st of July 2023.
no, technically they have to start after the first rates payment
Yeah.
is made.
Right.
So it's not an immediate sort of 1 July, but I mean, in terms of budgeting purpose, it's indicative that will happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then the other question that I had was, and hopefully Stefan can answer this, 530K, what jobs will that be divvied or broken up into?
Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't listed the work done under each of the items. There's a lot. A lot, I mean, pages of work that was done under each of those three amounts of 61,000 and 388,000. So you're probably only aware of the higher profile remediations that were done, but underneath that is right down to slip clearance and visibility, high cuts, all kinds of different things. You'll be aware of the Adelaide Health work for the 4 communities that were cut off in the latest high rain, and sort of clearing those roads within part of it is very, very long list considering.
So if between now and
Excuse me, I think councillor Maynard.
Oh, I'll let him finish his, but he's still on the same question pretty much, so I'll let him go further.
so if we go through and have another couple of events between now and the 1st of July, and we go through that last 316,000, what's the process for council?
You'd have to approve unbudgeted expenditure, full stop, and it goes against our there's two choices. One is you simply say take it from existing roading budgets, which means some of the services that we would have been delivering would not be. So it's always an option. It's just to drop the level of funding and prioritise this as a committed. The other is to approve it as unbudgeted operating expenditure as opposed to funded from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just a little bit worried. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but this is the date from the 30th of the 11th, 2022. It was only 316,000 left in 848. So how are we making this payment? This is actually going to take us to nothing in here. Yeah, into negative. Am I reading it right, or is that a mistake?
It's the balance after those three figures, 61, 47, and 388 are taken out. You've got a remainder of 316,000.
Makes sense, Councillor.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So funding, just to circle back to Aidan's question, remember the value of the actual works that we're doing is in the 1.52 million, right? So Waka-Kotahi, this is what we're paying is our local share of the 72% subsidy that, so the great work, Tim, normally for works, you get a 52% VAR rate. So Tim has been very successful in negotiating 72% subsidy from Waka-Kotahi. This could be a whole lot worse. So the amount of work that is being scheduled is actually $2 million of works, of which our local share is the 583.
I think it's great there, Harry, but it's the oh shit, what happens in February when we have the out of cycle storm, which we often have in February.
Yeah.
Have we got enough money in there to do this? And so it's the bigger question of actually, have we been putting enough aside every year?
Yes, and that's an annual plan question, because you can at your own motion, consult with the community, of course, increase the amount that will be collected by rates to go into this fund.
Okay, now I think Councillor Woodcock, you may have spoken once already. Is it very new?
It's just a comment on Alistair's thing there. You're quite right, Alistair, with the February thing, because it's not actually an out of cycle storm. The Wairarapa is traditional bad weather, as in January and February for big floods and that from years ago. So it's quite likely something like that could happen.
Great. Okay, any further comments? There being none. So do you wish to exercise a right of reply? You do not. Okay, so we've got the recommendations, which is that we approve the funding, $583,332. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. And now we come to the draft Carterton and South
We're doing
Byron.
that at 3.
Are we doing okay?
No, I think we're doing that at 3 when Johannes is coming to speak to that.
Oh, okay
Yeah.
then, right, so we will skip by that.
So as you'll be aware, Tim would normally be speaking to this. He's not able to. And so we've invited Johannes from Carterton, who has presented it to Carterton Council, because it's very important that we are aligned as two councils in what we're doing. So Johannes will be coming at 3 to talk to this agenda item, the speed one. So
Okay, so we'll now go to C7, which is page 171. Right, so purpose of this report, provide a recommendation to formally proceed with the development of a new Wellington Region Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. And I understand from Mr. Corbett, who's there somewhere, that this actually is a little bit urgent. So we'll come to that. So officers recommend to the council that we agree to proceed with the development for Wellington Region Wellington Waste Management and Minimisation Plan 2023 to 2029. And we note that the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan have to be reviewed every 6 years as a statutory requirement, and that the current plan is to be reviewed by January 2023, which is next month. If the timeframes to approve the review and approve the new plan are not met, the waste levy payments to councils may be withheld by the Ministry for the Environment, which we probably do not wish. Does anybody wish to move those two motions, please? Councillor Macaulay, anybody seconding it? Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Macaulay, would you like to comment at this stage?
I just agree totally with the recommendation, in terms of, say, the optimal way to go.
Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Yep, I concur.
And, Stefan, would you like just to briefly explain what the urgency is? And
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, this is a fairly simple matter of council. We have to prevent the draft waste assessment, which we have done as soon as the Ministry of Health comes back and the medical officer gives us feedback, then we meet that condition, which is one of 2 conditions that we have met. So the draft waste assessment is done as soon as that medical officer comes back and feedback on our draft. So you don't need to worry about that. That's for note. The authority that we need to be today is the formal decision that you proceed with a new waste minimisation plan. We're at the very start of that, so you'll be getting a lot of information on this. There'll be drafts, there'll be approval to consult, full consultation. It's a regional document of enormous importance, I might add, as we are in an environment where every year we're being charged more and more for landfill, and the urgency for us to reduce our landfill and reduce our cost and the impact on the environment is increasing dramatically each year. So the waste minimisation plan is really important. We've been asked to do today is make that decision, proceed with the development of the review.
thank you very much. Any further comments? Right.
Which committee is this all going?
Well, I think this is
Okay.
I have the structure.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's yours, Rebecca. It's all yours.
Rebecca.
I can tell you're looking forward to this one.
I then yes.
right. Thank you very much, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Okay, anything you wish to sum up with, Kay? Thank you. Okay, right. So we have the recommendations in front of us. All those who agree to them, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. There being none, carried. Thank you very much. Oh, well, we're not at 3:00 yet, so we're going to have to fill in a little bit of time. What are we allowed to go to next, Darren?
310, the grant funding.
Grant funding.
Let's go to grant funding.
It's probably tough.
310, that's a long way away, isn't it?
Amazing how much the agenda suddenly starts looking smaller when you take out the waste minimisation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the cynic.
Okay, thank
So
you
you
very
know
much.
that.
Right, so what we're going to do is to deal with an outstanding funding application and consideration of the delegation options for the remaining community and youth funds. Now, Amy has just suggested that she has got some improved wording, so I'll read it out slowly. The first recommendation is that we approve or decline funding of 7,500 to Wharekāka Trust to support the Meals on Wheels program. And we delegate the remaining community and youth fund equally between the community boards and the Maori standing committees. Now, I think we'll take them one at a time because they are sufficiently different. So let's start with Wharekāka. So the recommendation is that we allocate 7,500 to Wharekāka. Do I have a mover? Well, I don't know if I do because you've already declared a conflict. So I wonder if somebody else would like to do it. Thank you. So Councillor Gray and a second.
Moving
Wharekāka.
Consider the funding.
to consider it so we can talk about it.
Approval deployment.
So we have one person.
Are you approving it or
Just considering it.
We're considering.
considering it? Yeah, that's what I said. So
Oh,
to
yeah.
consider it, he wanted to know.
Anybody second that?
I'm happy to consider it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Maynard. Right, so what would you like to say, please?
I guess, so the two parts to it. So on the one hand, I think that funding something like this, it's difficult when we're talking about how tight our budgetary constraints are to think that we can give money away to an organisation. But I think that the importance of this organisation, the service that they provide, is, I think it's very important. It can't be overstated how much of a gap in services there is out here coming from the DHB. Also knowing that they have, I guess, future plans that will negate the need to rely on this funding in the future. I think it's a good thing to do.
Councillor Maynard.
I do have some concerns. Previously, when the application came, we had to push to get them to approach to go and find out if they could get money because we knew that you could get, if you had provided Meals on Wheels, you could get funded and they had never tapped into it before. So it's great that they've gone and gotten that information. I too, think that's fabulous. And the fact that they've actually been told that that will go through just when, until it does. I also think that we need to support this, but I think that we also need to perhaps put something in, like some kind of agreement that it's not something that we will continue to do once the funding comes in from the appropriate place. Because when she spoke, I did note that Joy said that she would be looking at the council to continue to provide throughout from now on, which would almost be, we'd be better off setting up an MOU if we were going to do that. But I don't think that it's appropriate in this instant when they're going through a process where they're looking at getting, perhaps changing what they look like and everything like that. I don't think it's right that the council gets caught up in that, in that, providing the money on top. but I do think that until that happens, and she said it's probably not going to be until about February. So I wouldn't look at the 7.5, which was what they were asking for to help towards the year. If they're looking at getting it through until February, I'd be more than happy to perhaps look at 5. Yeah, that's just my thoughts anyway.
Well, what, if we'll just ask councillor Olds to make a comment, because he had his hand up, then we'll come back to you if that's all right.
Yeah, I have got some concerns, but like the others, I have to say, MSD get on very lightly, because if I look at funding for our food bank, for instance, they fund nothing down here. It's all done through charitable donations and fundraising efforts. We don't come to council cap in hand for funding for food bank. While I appreciate that Wharekākā do a wonderful job and on Meals on Wheels and their whole district benefits from their contribution, I get a little concerned when they come to us, or our ratepayers basically, and ask us to top up the difference, where I feel that that's probably a Ministry of Social Development funding model, not for our local ratepayers. So I'm caught between a rock and a hard place here, because I really support what they do. And Joy made it pretty clear this morning that that they couldn't continue to provide the service at a loss what they're currently doing. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to the vote, I guess I'll vote to support it, but I want my vote to be.
Councillor.
I'm exactly like you, Colin. I've got some real concerns about this. I know that the last 3 years we have been trying to encourage them to go and seek funding and talk to the DHB as it was. And it seems that it's only happened very recently. And I just get an impression that this is the easy way out. It's a great service. There's no doubt about it. But coming to council all the time after time, and like you said, is this going to be the end of it, or are we going to just see this going on and on again? Whereas actually, this is actually a responsibility of health within our Health New Zealand. I don't see, and I may be wrong, but Masterton's Meal on Wheels going back to Masterton Council time and time again for ongoing funding. I don't know whether they are, but I would doubt it.
This is funded.
I too would.
That's right.
You will get it right.
But it's a DHB responsibility. It's not a council responsibility.
I would like to make a comment. Firstly, any grant that we give, I would be clear that we must not imply that this would be an ongoing. It's not the first instalment in a plan, in my view. Secondly, I acknowledge that there is a need here. I think we all do.
Yes.
But equally, I acknowledge that there's also a much wider need in the district, and you've mentioned food banks, and the demands on food banks have grown considerably in the last year. There are also young families who struggle to get medical and dental assistance when they need. There are other older people who have a range of other problems due to loneliness, for example, due to a number of factors. And my preference would be that whilst I'm happy to go along with maybe the $5,000 indicated from Councillor Maynard, that what we start to do thereafter is try and put in place if you like, a social awareness fund, something that responds strategically to the sorts of needs we're talking here, because I think it is easier for certain groups of people to, as you say, come and submit to us because they are people like us. There are other groups, dare I say it, with just as much need who find it quite intimidating to come. And I think we need a process from the new financial year that makes funding in this area more equitable and clearly so to everybody. So what I was going to invite Councillor Maynard to do, if she wished, was to move an amendment that the 7,500 become 5,000. You wish that?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just, again, I'm like the auction house.
Well, what we do is we second, then we discuss it. I will second that. And now we can discuss it. I don't know that you and I need to say more, councillor Maynard, so.
I'll listen to what Melissa has to say and then if I need to.
I've sort of got two things. One is a support for your idea of a greater awareness of some of the social difficulties in our community. Certainly when we talked about a community committee, that kind of food poverty, community wellbeing, social injustice, those sorts of things sort of in my mind fell under that. We've gone a different path and that's fine, but I do think that there is a responsibility for council to be, at least have an awareness and be a driver of kind of writing some of that in a way, not necessarily funding it, but having an awareness of it. The second question I have is around our normal application process for grants, because in my life outside of this, grants have been a bit more structured. So we've got a bit of a plan and a where to and a how, and I would have a lot of interest in this particular grant application on the sort of sustainability without our funding which we don't seem to have. So.
Amanda's got a question.
Yes, no, I'd like to hear from Amanda.
Thank you through you, Chair. We do have a grants policy. It's not a very workable grants policy. It doesn't make it easy for a user or an applier of a grant. It's not very clear.
There's no like application form.
It absolutely is, but there's complexities because we've got this idea of partnership grants, which are exactly that longer term. We agree to go into an agreement with you for 3 years, but what that does is then it looks like you've got a chunk of money available to the community, but 3/4 of that's already been allocated, and you need a one, which means you come along and you agree with a good idea, and it's only a tiny bit of money left. So it needs some rework. My team had done some work on that policy. Stefan's elbowing me because there's more money coming.
Chair, if I might just respond to the first point that the Deputy Mayor has made about Council's desire and responsibility to address social injustice and equity issues in our communities. And I fully agree with what's been said by the councillor. And I know that that was one of the core objectives behind the use of the $1.88 million of Better Off funding, and forming the only in design stage at the moment, subject to your approval, but informing the community wellbeing fund, a way for us to connect with communities, find out what they need, and then work with them on their solution. So there is
and this grant needs to come through a grants committee and with an application alongside a whole lot of other grants, and it was held because of the funding we wanted to get confirmation for the HV.
And we had them come a second time with more information and there still wasn't enough information, so we couldn't make the decision then. So
I've just got a question. Would be Meals on Wheels. Did they just supply Martin Barrel, or they did the whole district?
Greytown, Featherston, Martin.
Okay, so what we're discussing at the moment is the amendment that the 7,500 become 5,000. Councillor Maynard, do you wish a right or a
yeah, just for look, at the end of the day, I think we have an obligation and you know, a duty of care that we as people in our positions and that we've been elected by our communities, that we always need to kind of keep there in the back anyway. And so that's why I'd like to put something towards it, but I believe that they really need to start looking at getting themselves up and running and doing it themselves. This isn't, now I might just need Amanda. I believe we have done this before and given them funding before. And so I think, yeah, so I think that this should be just like, let's do this to help them get through to that point when they get the funding from the area, Te Whatu Ora, who actually do it for every other Meals on Wheels in the country.
Thank you very much.
I've got a conflict of interest, but I don't know if I'm allowed to speak to just a clarification. There's a bit of misinformation going around, which may or may not, which actually Joy did answer this morning, but which may or may not, I don't think it'll probably fix the decision, but I just wonder if I'm allowed to.
If it's information, that's.
Information?
Yep.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it just interested, I don't know if you had, Joy actually confirmed this morning that Masonic, which they think is might be going ahead or something, they're not going to do the Meals on Wheels, so they won't do it. Yeah, she said that, confirmed that this morning, I asked her. And so that means it won't be ongoing. So I'm not saying that affects your decision at all, but everyone keeps talking about ongoing. So if this will be decided in February or something, so it'll be Meals on Wheels, we're looking for another home. I think originally they hoped it would take it over, but so really it's been at provision of villas and rental accommodation, non-serviced accommodation.
Thank you. Right, so the amendment is that we replace the 7,500 with 5,000. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. It's carried.
Abstain.
Well, they're not allowed to. So it's nothing to abstain from. Okay, so now we come to. Now, I think consider funding is a rather wishy-washy sort of. We either fund them by $5,000 or we don't at this point. Because if we consider it, what are we actually doing? So I think we have to approve the funding.
Yep.
And so I move that we approve funding of $5,000 to Wharekākā Trust for the Meals on Wheels. Do I have a seconder? I do, Councillor Holmes. Anybody else wish to? Okay, I am making an assumption that in these sorts of processes, we have a very clear way of knowing that the money was spent on Meals on Wheels and not on
Other things,
Okay, thank you. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I'm making the assumption that when we send a letter to Wharekākā, that will include some of the sentiments about want to help. But equally, we expect them to not assume that this is an ongoing commitment on the part. So thank you very much. So I think I see a strange, oh yes, sorry. Now let's come to the Community and Youth Fund. And so what we're now considering is part two, consider the delegation of the remaining Community and Youth Fund equally between the community boards and the Maori Standing Committee. There's two things that I think it's important to just inquire about here. How much money are we talking about, please?
30K.
30K.
No, 25.
25, thank you.
25.
And when we say equally between the community boards and the Maori Standing Committee, does that mean 12.5 to the community boards and 12.5 to the Maori Standing Committee? Or does it mean?
Always split.
You think it's a four-way split?
That's the intention.
Okay, well, as long as we understand that, we won't go wrong. Okay, do we have a mover, please? We do, Councillor Ealams, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gray. Hayden, speak to us.
Speak to us. I just feel certainly be beneficial for the Maori Standing Committee and the community boards to receive a bit of extra grant funding. There's experience with the Martinborough Community Board. There was always organisation and asking for assistance and help and hand up and to help fund activities throughout the community. I imagine the same with the other communities around the South Wairarapa, as well as the Maori Standing Committee. I'm unsure as to whether, how much grant funding the Maori Standing Committee has had in the past, but I imagine that they would be helpful, they'll appreciate any additional funding they can receive.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I concur. I think it's good that this sits with the community boards and the Māori Standing Committee. I think that having that ability to be as responsive and flexible to be able to grant funds goes a long way to giving the community boards greater standing within the community. So I think in terms of future proofing the community boards, I think it's a good thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is something I'm not going to support, I'm afraid. This is either unallocated grant funding or not uplifted grant funding. Unallocated grant funding, yeah. So uplift, yeah. Okay. So my view is that we generally set aside about $175,000 a year for grant funding allocation. We aren't an organisation that gives away money freely. It has to be for the benefit of all and support our communities. And my suggestion would be that that money be rolled over to the next grant funding financial year. I know my CFO is not going to be happy about that, but just because it's there, I don't believe that we should be spending it. It could either top up our grant funding for next year's allocation, or it can reduce the amount of money that we actually have to allocate for grant funding in the next financial year. So for that reason.
If I could just assume the CFO is not yours.
Oh, sorry.
Your private financial advisor.
Rephrase that.
How are you going to rephrase that?
Thank you for your very clear explanation of why you are opposed, and I think it's a good principle to get into, to start by indicating, are you in favour of the motion or are you opposed to it, and why? So
before I answer that part, could I just get a couple of questions of the staff to little form? Community boards have already been allocated money in the grants proposal, so I'm assuming, and the Māori Standing Committee has it as well, yeah?
The Māori Standing Committee did not get any grant funding for this financial year. The community boards have grant, it's been divvied up into grants and what has traditionally been called a beautification fund. They easily spend their grant money, they don't always easily spend their beautification money. We're going to change that.
And then the second part I got on this is there still money held in the Merrill Fund for, there's always been the ability to send a person on outward bound or something like that from the community. Okay, cool. So I'm opposed to this because for the same reasons as Colin, but I would also like to see some money held centrally should there be an application from a youth within our community to go on something like Outward Bound or that sort of thing, because I've seen firsthand the difference that can make to a young person's life.
how much would you recommend be?
So that costs about $10,000 to go on it. Okay. And it will depend on if there's an applicant as to the circumstances, the family circumstances, so on. And sometimes in the past, I know that the mayor has funded the entire amount, past history. Sometimes it's
$10,000.
Sorry. Say again?
So is it really $10,000?
Yeah, it is.
Outside?
Yeah. So, but it doesn't matter when that's what we use it for. But it's that principle of holding something that the council could make a difference in a person's life. That said, yes, I do think we probably need to put something to the Māori Standing Committee if we're doing it for community boards. I think there's an element within our society that probably doesn't apply to the community board. The Māori Standing Committee should be able to have something to within that environment. Now, whether that $5,000 would make a big difference to that.
I wonder if we could agree on a split, $5,000 for the supporting an individual or individuals, $5,000 for the, which is roughly what would have come out here anyway, according to my maths. So, or are you suggesting 50?
5,000 to the Māori Standing Committee.
Agreed.
The rest held centrally within a Merrill Fund, and if it doesn't get spent, then exactly as Colin says, it gets rolled over to next year.
Okay, right.
Because the community boards have got their own money anyway.
Well, I think that's very generous offer to young people in the community, and as it happens, something has just recently propped up that would enable us to spare the small amount of that. But councillor Mather.
I actually, I also agree with councillor Olds. For myself, I think that yes, you'd be very, very surprised at how quickly the grant funding disappears. And I think that what we need to do more is we need to give the community board the, like just to remind them that when we have our grant funding rounds coming up on the council level, and people that, to be able to ascertain where they fit, because if they're needing like $300 to go towards their sports teams t-shirts or something like that, then that's where the community board work really well. But if they're needing more, so for the whole sports group, then that needs to come to council, and we don't get a lot of opportunities. We always look like we're always taking money. It's nice to at some point be able to give some back to the community.
Go to Deputy Mayor. You had something to say or not?
Oh, I was just going to get a little bit of further clarity for councillor Plummer's idea of the central sort of mayoral fund, which I actually quite like. I was just wondering, you said, oh, if it doesn't get spent, that's okay. Do you envisage that would just be a fund that kind of rolls?
No, if it doesn't get spent, it goes back into the kitty.
Within the financial year.
Within financial year, yeah. You don't need to spend grant.
From a procedural point of view, what we're going to do is start with the recommendation we have in front of us, which leads to the four-way split. If that is not agreed to, then we're going to go to councillor Plymmer's recommendation and we'll formally adopt it. And then if that doesn't get agreed to, then councillor Olds has won the day because we're not giving it to anyone. So is everybody clear how we're going to deal with this?
Mr. Mayor.
Amanda's just got to.
Amanda.
Between Karen and I, this is operational money. Operational money shouldn't, in essence, be carried over from year to year. You don't lose it, you lose. You don't use it, you lose it. That's the premise of operation.
I'm sorry, that's not correct. This is not a government department that loses money.
Financial.
It's an operating cost for 1 year. We set aside 170,000 each financial year. Money that's not spent. Goes into
Yeah, but it doesn't disappear into the ether. It's yeah. So it's still ours.
So yes.
Yeah.
But we don't roll it over for sake of that purpose.
No, but we can decide to. We've got the option. I think that's the point.
Can I just clarify to what date we have to?
30th of June.
Okay, so we've still got plenty of time where we may receive applications. Do we have another date for grant applications?
So that was my next point, is that when we've done grant applications in the past, we open the grant application process, we get a whole lot of submissions. That's the committee we were talking about earlier, which is the grant subcommittee. They usually have 2 days of hearings because of the volume of applicants. We've only got $25,000. Normally, so it's 170 for community and there's another 75 for youth. That gets done together, so it's actually more like 250. We're only going to have 25,000. So for 2 days of hearings and a whole lot of applications coming in for $25,000, it's a lot of effort to go to for a very small amount of money. So that's some of the consideration of holding another grant open round, is that we've got a very small amount of money to go away.
And if it were to be, if they recommend to distribute to the community boards, and they'd still have to spend it by the 30th of June, but the requests would just come through community board meetings as they're held, rather than a formal.
Yeah, it was. Application. Yeah.
25,000, so it's not.
30.
30 less the 5 we just gave to.
Oh,
So
Yeah.
that was a question. So is this a legal requirement or is it a capital policy?
Not carry over,
Yeah.
not carry, it's
It's an accounting treatment.
an accounting standard. So you carry over, it's a capital, it's multi-year, OpEx is one of them. It's rolled into the circle, and you can make it.
You can't take it back out of next year plus the problem.
Yeah.
Right, now, I'll just check with the deputy mayor that she's had an answer that she's happy with.
I've had some clarity.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a completely different question. So if it was surplus and it went back in, it would come off rates, right? Or no, because it's OPEX.
Doesn't come off right.
So because it's OPEX. Is that why?
No, so the surplus, I think, and Karen can help me explain it. So
But it can roll over. So that's why I'm asking.
so you can't take that amount, 30,000, and simply say next year when we had budgeted 120,000, it's now 150, right? You can't carry it and add it to that line.
No, but can we take it off?
And
We can take it off. That's what.
Take it off. You can
Yeah.
say, instead of 120, we're only going to take 90.
90.
that's an annual plan decision.
Sorry?
That's what Karen's point is. It's an annual plan decision.
Oh,
So actually, yeah.
That's right, every year, when you set your own plan, so it goes over. Underspend some of that 170, it rolls into the surplus. And you've got another 170 for the following year. So if you decide to reduce the next year, knowing you've got a surplus, which you wouldn't at that point, you can't just keep rolling over money, you've got to use it or lose it in finance.
But we do that every year.
Hmm.
in reports. Every year.
Yeah,
The beautification budget.
Hmm.
It's over. Never ends.
So when I went to do that this year, Karen told me off.
But I know, but it's been going on for
And said,
Yeah.
forever.
You can do it.
But it can happen.
Best practice. And there are some things I'm still reviewing.
You can achieve the objective. We're just talking about the accountant treatment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure we will improve our practice over time.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
And I'm sure, Karen, you're very good at doing it.
But you've got a resolution.
let us come back to the resolution. And the resolution is that we split the money 4 ways. If that fails, we're going to Councillor Plymouth's recommendation. That fails, then the only thing that's left is Councillor Holmes, and it will not need voting upon. So all in favour of the remaining community and youth fund being equally split 4 ways between the community boards and the Maori Standing Committee. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All against say no. No.
We have no other option.
There's it's unclear to the chair how that fell. So
I
we're going to,
my brain was still processing and I didn't vote either way because
well, you're in luck.
I'm still back in a position where I'm like, did we agree that we could roll over or did we not agree that we can't roll over?
No, so I think nowhere else to.
However, let us be clear, if there is $30,000 spent at the end of the year, which goes into the surplus, it is up to this council how it gets spent next year. So it doesn't disappear in any way. It is still there. We may decide to spend it on roads though.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're now going to have a show of hands, please. Those in favour of the 4-way split, please put up their hands. There being 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against, please put up their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That motion is lost. We will now move to Councillor Plymouth's motion, which I'll ask you to restate, please, Alison, just so we're clear on the specifics.
I'd like to see $5,000 go into a grant funding for the Maori Standing Committee. The remainder gets held centrally and can be used
Which it is now.
or whatever, which it is now. If that money's not spent, then it goes held as surplus.
So in essence, all you're doing is approving
5,000 to
Maori Standing grants to Maori Standing.
Well, I think Councillor Plymouth has added a useful point of clarification that the other money is to go for the sort of things that helps young people.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
well, we could spend it on it, doesn't mean we have to, but it's all sensible.
Absolutely.
I would love to see a Merrill fund, but
So that's been moved by councillor Plummer. The mayor seconds it. Is there any debate?
There was a.
Karen did,
Yes. Amanda, Karen, Russell?
Say that means you're creating a fund of some sort. with
not necessarily,
criteria.
not necessarily. People could make an application and we could approve it.
So what,
Sure, what mechanism?
it's still under grant funding, isn't it?
It will come under grant.
Essentially. Put money in there, but if we choose to use it for purpose, it's like.
If it was outside the grant funding policy, then therefore it'd have to be a separate payment to council.
No, but it's not outside the grant funding policy because somebody applies for it and it comes in.
Yeah, but that's a grant application, so therefore we'd have to follow due process.
Yeah, but I didn't say.
The grants.
So leave it in the grants, just, we'll say.
Yeah, that's exactly what we just said. We're taking 5,000 to the Maori Standing Committee. The remainder stays in the central pool. It goes into,
Yeah.
that's what I said. My idea is that we could potentially use that just agree, should there be an application for it. No.
Right.
No.
We can spend money.
Okay, so let's come back now.
So my proposal is
Yes,
$5,000 to the Merrill Fund, to the.
Maori Standing Committee.
The remainder stays in the central pool. If that money is not granted,
We
it
get another vote.
goes to surplus.
Right, thank you very much. I think that's very clear. Councillor Woodcock,
Yeah, I just,
are you speaking for or against?
I just want to clarify with, so we don't vote yes on this option. What was Colin's option again?
It just stays as it
And then rolls over.
That doesn't go anywhere.
So the only difference is the Maori Standing.
So the only resolution, apart from the commentary, is actually to grant $5,000 to Maori Standing.
Okay, so anybody wish to speak for or against? Okay, there being none. All in favour of councillor Plummer's proposal, please say aye. Aye.
Right,
Those against, no.
What, no right of reply to the non-comments.
Okay, the ayes have it. Now, my apologies, Stefan, we've gone slightly over time, so if you'd like to table. Well, I'm just conscious of how long we might have held Johannes up for.
Usually just a quick 5-minute toilet break. Yeah, before we start.
Okay, well, look, yeah, let's have a wee break. But just before we do that, I do have some good news. 2 days after the election, and I was theoretically the mayor-elect, a fire broke out, 5 fires broke out in our part of the world.
yes.
And you may recall that the mayor from Carterton turned up and pretended to be the mayor from South Wairarapa and told the world. And while he was doing that, I set up what I called a Merrill Fund, even though it strictly probably wasn't, in order to gain, give a little page basically to raise some funds. Obviously, it wasn't ever going to be enough to replace the buildings or anything like that, but it might have given them a nice holiday, some, things to do to distract them. And anyway, I've just heard today that money's now been paid out to the Morrisons and the Van Dalens, and our community raised $1,500 for each family. So I think that's
Fantastic.
right. 5 minutes for wherever.
So did Alice just come to the line, did it?
Yep.
Which was a secret, it was 5 now.